As you'll know, over the years there's been quite a few attempts at trying to create Minecraft, or at least a Minecraft style game, onto the likes of the systems like the Dreamcast. Crafty is one of them. It appeared a few years ago and was pretty much darn good at trying to create the feel and look of the original Minecraft. And Crafty itself starts its journey, or did start its journey, as a Texas Instruments graphic calculator title. There's been a few in the past, and that was one of them, and then that was ported onto the Sega Dreamcast. There were no enemies, but the basic build mechanics were certainly there. Now, we have ClassiCube, a game that attempts to bridge what games like Crafty never had. It has online multiplayer, a far superior graphics system, keyboard and mouse support, just to name a few. During this video, we'll take a deep dive into what ClassiCube is, what it's trying to achieve, and let's ask the developers behind this those all-important questions. Let's do it. Now, once you boot up the game, you're met with a pretty snappy intro screen. For example, options for online, which we'll go into shortly, as well as a standard single player, which is probably why you're here anyway, but it does, like I said, offer online, but we will go through that very, very shortly. There is also an option screen, which is actually quite a nice little addition, and grants various changes to things like hotkeys, which is a great thing, especially for games like ClassiCube, as well as textures and other bits and pieces, which is great, because you can actually add texture packs via the SD card reader attachment for the Sega Dreamcast, which is great, and will also enable you to, in future updates, download texture packs, which, let's face it, if you're joining a server that requires a different texture pack, great, it'll download, so nice and easy. As well as this, you can even change up the theming of the game itself and the menus, which is another great addition that I love, because it adds that level of customization. As you'll notice, the game very much looks and feels like the OG Minecraft, which is what it's actually trying to look like and feel like. Even the animations on placing building blocks, hitting trees, and more feel very, very familiar. But don't be fooled, as this was built from the ground up with zero assets from the Mojang title. Now, keyboard and mouse is definitely the way to go here, as it is fully supported, but if you don't have a keyboard and mouse for the Dreamcast, then yes, I think the Dreamcast gamepad does a pretty good and serviceable job for navigation and gameplay here. One bit I'm sure you can notice is there is currently no sound on the Dreamcast version, although this will come in future updates, and I think at the moment it's just trying to get a stable frame rate here, because a lot of the time with games they omit the sound to kind of focus on tweaking the frame rate, and then they add the sound later on. But hey, that's just my take on it anyway. One of the questions I did ask one of the developers was, why port the PC title ClassiCube onto the Dreamcast? Now, being that it has come to many different systems here so far, including the GameCube and the like, why the Dreamcast? The Dreamcast was actually on the simpler side in terms of issues when it came to running on real hardware, because I decided to use the established GLDC library to handle the rendering. I mostly avoided the issues compared to other console ports, where I went straight to programming for the console's graphics API directly. The only major hardware difference I think of is how, while trying to use 32-bit pixel mode worked fine in emulation, it did not work so well on actual hardware. Now, as you can see, there's some sample images, kind of background exclusive images that you wouldn't have seen on any video. They are all here, which is great to see. In terms of the Dreamcast porting process itself, I started with the Callistos for the SDK, GLDC for the low-level rendering, and NullDC is the emulator of choice when actually building this port. Callistos is a solid and well-documented SDK, so not much to say there aside from it's a great project. GLDC is also a solid library, but it's missing some features, and I did end up rewriting quite a bit of it to optimize for how ClassiCube renders things. I think the only issues I had with it were mistakes I made when trying to modify GLDC. Probably the biggest mistake was initially trying to use NullDC as the emulator for testing, which, to be fair, doesn't surprise me, because although it had .elf support and immediately visible debug console window, I ran into confusing graphics rendering issues, which, hey, unfortunately, they did have those issues. So how did ClassiCube actually come to be, and what was the actual main driver for creating ClassiCube in the first place? In 2012, Mojang was beginning to no longer support Minecraft Classic, and that gameplay and easy to understand mechanical niche wasn't really filled by anything existing at the time. In mid-2013, the server list for Classic broke, and some other site-side and Java-side changes were making it near impossible to play. Soon after, I threw together a site, grabbed a few folks who were knowledgeable and dedicated to the gameplay of Classic, and with some verbal permissions from Mojang's employees, that's right, actually RC employees themselves, at the time we rehosted the Classic client with some modifications to allow it to work on our site. After a year or so, I found Unknown Shadow 2000, by the way, that is one of the developers behind this, work on Classical Sharp, a Minecraft Classic compatible game that was open source and free of any code or assets made by Mojang. Now, what I can say is obviously thank you to developers for obviously giving us that insight, because let's face it, not every YouTube channel can do that. Now, we're going to hand over to James from It's Much More to, let's run through the actual online side, shall we? Let's do that.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, it's James from It's Much More. I'm going to take a look at the online side of things for ClassiCube on the Sega Dreamcast using original hardware, also using the broadband adapter, because currently, as the posting of this video, the DreamPie version is still in development, but that changes every single day with changes and updates being done. Mouse and keyboard are supported as well. So to play online, all you need to do is go on the ClassiCube website, create an account and make sure it's verified, then log in using your Dreamcast keyboard on this game with the username and password that you created. When you find a server, some of them may have different textures which are not fully supported yet on the Dreamcast. So when you do find a server that has textures like this one, which is a lava survival server, you can play that to your heart's content. It is still early stages, it's an alpha build, so sometimes it's going to crash, some servers ain't going to work, some textures might not load, but it's still enjoyable as it is for the moment in time.
Now, what I would say, this is likely to be a game that you're going to want to check out. ClassiCube is coming to many systems, and it leads me to believe that maybe we're going to get online support across all of the systems. Just imagine, doesn't matter what system you're on, you'd absolutely be able to play ClassiCube on it with your friend who could be, for example, on a PSP and you're on a Dreamcast. Hey, it's already on Xbox, GameCube, PS2, amongst others. Just imagine that. Now that is building a community and at zero cost. You cannot deny ClassiCube really is setting some sort of stage here that kind of really does start to compete with what Minecraft tries to be nowadays. I think Minecraft's kind of lost its way, if I'm honest, and maybe ClassiCube is maybe trying to knock it off its mantle a little. As always, if you don't already, please subscribe, drop a comment, and let me know what you think. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. It's Al signing out.